Let's go through how to take your rubber plant from this to this. And I will also show you how to propagate the cuttings from this to this. This is very clearly a rescue, but you can propagate a healthy rubber plant the exact same way. You can see the big sister next to her looks much healthier and happier. If I was propagating that plant, I would use the same method. Let's move on to the rescue of the poor ficus that was a snail's lunch. Don't be too upset if this happens to any of your plants. Most of them can bounce back with a good chop and prop. So let's get into it. Step one, of course, is to remove any of the damaged foliage. Yeah, I'm cutting off any of the foliage which has succumbed to the elements. Being in Melbourne, Australia, this poor gal has had to deal with 40-degree days, a freak hailstorm, and of course some big Aussie critters. The damaged leaves that I'm removing are going to go straight into the compost. The ficus is not one of those plants which you can propagate from a single leaf like you can with a peperomia. There is no need to keep any of these leaves. To propagate the rubber plant, you want to take a section of stem with about 3 leaves on it. As for where to cut, you want to cut just above a node. You will find the nodes where the leaves meet the stem. Quick pause to rescue this little cutie, even though she did some damage. Now let's get back to the propagation. You can see that the rubber plant is looking quite bare now. Don't worry though, where I snipped off the leaves, new branches should grow. And yes, I meant branches, not leaves. Pruning back your plants is a great way to make them bushier. That means there will be new branches up and down these stems. Now for the cuttings, you can put these in soil, but I prefer water propagation. To do this, leave your cuttings out for a few hours or overnight so that they callus. The callus will protect the stem from rotting in the water. If there is any leaves at the base of your cutting, it's best to strip these off as well to avoid rotting. If you have taken your cuttings in spring, you should start to see roots in a few weeks. The first stage is this popcorn stage, which is little white growths on the stems. For my water propagations, I tend not to change the water, I just top them up as needed. I find this helps them to root faster. After the popcorn stage, another week or so, you should start to see roots like this. They're not long enough to transfer to soil just yet, so pop them back in water for a few more weeks. During this time, the mother plant has been pretty dormant. There is some tiny little shoots growing along the stem, but not much is happening yet. That's okay, she's been through a lot, just keep her in a sunny and humid spot. As I mentioned, I don't change the water in my water propagations, but I do sometimes change the vessel. You may need to size up once your roots start to grow. You need to have space in your vessel. Your cutting needs to be almost floating and not touching the base of your vessel. Choose a glass with a wider opening as well so that the roots can come out without getting damaged. This is another 3 weeks later and you can really see that the roots have grown beautifully. These cuttings are now ready to transfer to soil. You can transfer your cutting to soil or a different potting medium of your choice as soon as the roots are 2 inches long. I like to wait a little bit longer until they have first and secondary roots. When potting up cuttings, please use a nursery pot or a grower's pot. There is so many benefits to using these, including the fact that they have great drainage, they are cheap and reusable, they're also malleable, which means repotting is very easy, and you can change your decorative planter on a whim without repotting your whole plant. I add some mesh to the base of my pot as well, as this helps to stop fine soil from falling through. This is optional, but a really good hack to get into. For this ficus, I'm using a good quality indoor potting mix. Fill your planter halfway with your medium. You can plant your cuttings together like I am, or keep them separate to make 2 new plants. Once your cuttings are in place, add more soil and then tap on the sides to make sure there are no air pockets. You may need to do this a few times. Next, you want to water your plant and make sure the soil is soaked. And I mean soaked. Make sure every single speck of soil is wet. This is my biggest tip for a successful transfer from water propagation to soil. Remember, this plant has been growing in hydro and the roots are used to being saturated at all times. If you pop them into a dry environment, you're going to get transplant shock and a sad dead cutting. Make sure the water is running out the base of your planter and then let it drip dry before adding to your decorative pot. Once potted up, I recommend popping it back in the spot where it was growing. This will also help to prevent any shock. Now the propagations are planted, let's have a look at the mother plant. She is now so beautiful and bushy, and you would not believe that it is the same sad plant that I had to rescue. The plant has really filled out all the way up the stem, and you can really see that each of the spots where I cut off a leaf now has a new branch with multiple leaves. Cutting your plants back is a really great habit to get into, not only when they need rescuing, but pruning once a year can really help promote new growth. It will stop you from having leggy houseplants. After all, who doesn't want a big, beautiful bush? Don't feel like you have to propagate every cutting you take, and don't be scared to pick up those shears.